Hi, Enoch.
Michelle, how are you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Welcome to I've Never Met a Woman Architect Before podcast with Michelle Grace Hottel. That's me. And my guest today is Enoch Sears. Enoch, how are you today?
Oh, beautiful. Just got back from Florida, been traveling a lot. We got beautiful weather. Talking to some people from New York where it's already 40 degrees and I'm telling you, yeah, it's 75. So
Really? It's
it's really hard to
40?
complain. Yeah.
So, Business of Architecture founder Enoch Sears is well known for his stand that architecture practice owners don't need to sacrifice their health, relationships, or financial well being to do work they enjoy. After working in the architectural industry for a decade, he launched the Business of Architecture podcast in 2012 to share the best practices for running a small architecture firm. Over the following decade, he spent more than $4.7 million refining the SMART practice operating system, an organized method for running a creatively fulfilling and financially rewarding architectural practice. More than 253 firm owners from around the world run their practices using the SMART, SMART practice operating system. Welcome, Enoch.
Thanks, Michelle.
um, so you just got back from Florida, and is there anything that you kind of want to say about your architecture practice, business of architecture?
Yeah, first I want to clarify that we're not an architectural practice.
Yes.
We are what would be considered a business consultancy, which when I was running an architectural practice, I didn't even know what that was. And I certainly didn't know how that could help me as a small firm owner. But what I discovered as I began to venture into practice as an owner, I began to understand that, like you read in the bio, that a lot of the stresses that we face as small firm owners aren't just relegated to the business, that they actually flow over into other areas of life. And for me, Michelle, it was late nights after dinner, working on my computer. And I remember my wife coming in occasionally and asking me, how much longer are you going to be working? And I think that is a good little anecdote about what can happen in our lives when we're passionate about something and we throw ourselves into it, and
Mm-hmm.
and then that becomes a pattern where we never get out of that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And as I began to talk to other architects, and really as they began to open up and talk about what was happening behind all the wonderful awards and behind all the pretty accolades that they were getting as
Yeah.
architects, and they really opened up, I discovered what I would say is a little bit of the dark underbelly of small architectural firm ownership. And these are very serious things, like people dealing with severe health complications like afibrillation in their hearts, high blood pressure at the age of 40,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
being just a constant state of stress and frustration. Architects who 20 years into their career were getting divorced because their wives or their husbands, in whichever case it was, were just like, this isn't working for me. And so,
Mm-hmm.
while a lot of that is going to be a part of any job or any position, right? Like life is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily lack stress. We're going to have
Mm-hmm.
stress wherever. But what I discovered is that if we don't have the proper tools, that stress becomes a lot more heavy to bear. And not only that, but it limits what we can accomplish in terms of our impact, in terms of our financial reward, in terms of our freedom, and ultimately what I believe is the abundant life that we all want to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, to be with your kids too, right? I mean, you have six
Well,
kids,
I
like
mean,
I have
people
three
say that, yeah,
kids. Yeah, yeah. My
yeah.
late my late ex-husband was also an architect and he worked for bigger firms, and so he was always there. And then I worked for myself. And so I was like, kind of working in architecture less time, but then, I was also raising the kids, which, that's a full-time job too, really. So yeah, because I wasn't working outside of the home. I was working here with my practice.
Well, and a lot of times that's a good point because a lot of times as firm owners, if we have kids, what I've noticed is we're usually unwilling to sacrifice time with the kids, which is great. So typically firm owners that I experience, what they'll do is they will go to the games, they will do the coaching. and they will make sure they spend that time with their kids, which is awesome.
Mhm.
However, what ends up happening is it actually detracts from their ability in their practice to be there. There are questions that don't get answered, fires that don't get put out. Sometimes they have to leave a ball game, or they have to be on their phone during vacation, or they're working in the morning while everyone else is going on that outing on vacation because they got to get those emails out. And the good news is it doesn't need to be that way, but no one ever taught us in architecture school how to structure a small practice so that it doesn't run your life, how you can put it on autopilot, how you can be able to spend your time doing creative work that's more fulfilling and enjoyable instead of getting bogged down in all the finances. And most importantly, how to not be in that rat race of, if for some people it's not a financial venture, so many small firm architects, they have the luxury of not having the financial need to make a lot of money. They may have a
Yeah.
partner who's
Yeah.
an income earner, maybe married to a doctor or a pilot or someone that has a good income, a college professor, maybe their spouse is a professor, something that's a good income earner. And so a lot of times they might not have the financial pressure to make money in the practice, which is nice. And that's a nice place to be at. And what I do know is it's a lot nicer when we're able to work less and actually earn a lot more compensation for what we do.
Mhm.
And that's what the podcast evolved into, was this team of experts that we've collected here at Business of Architecture, spanning everything from business development, accountants, and we have the full slew of experts, because one of the keys that I found for any area of life is bring in people who know what they're doing, who are experts in that. And
Mhm.
then that allows you or me to be able to focus on what we do best. And in my
Mhm.
experience, when I'm doing what I do best and I always like it, my whole life is better.
Mhm.
I have more excitement in life. There's less drudgery. There's just more. It's more fulfilling
Yeah.
at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I mean,
it's
there's a lot of architects out there that, I mean, even if they do, right, it's not really good for you to like look at a firm and you're thinking, wow, like, wow, they're making it so, but then you find out that, it's like they're independently wealthy, right? Or there is something, or they're teaching and that's like funding. And then one of my friends was saying, oh, isn't that great? I'm like, that's a horrible business plan. It's a horrible business plan to think that you're going to be teaching and getting that money, and then you're bringing it. Those are two separate entities. They're two separate entities. There's the teaching income, and then there's your business. And that those are different. Yeah.
Yeah, ideally, right? It reminds me of a story. I was very early on. It must have been 12 years ago or so. We were holding an event in New York, and I was talking with a very smart woman architect, very intelligent, very passionate, very ambitious.
Mhm.
Like, she's very switched on, very, very smart. And as we were chatting, she told me about an experience that she had with her accountant where they were going over the books. And he looked at her, and she'd been taking home above and beyond what the firm was making. She'd been paying herself $2,000 to $3,000 a month, right?
Oh yeah.
And so he asked her,
Yeah.
he said, well,
Yeah.
how much, if you were working for another firm, how much would you be earning? And at this stage, she would have been earning at least six figures because of the role and the capacity that
Of
she was
course.
at.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
then he kind of did a little bit of a calculation, and he said, did you realize that you're running a nonprofit business? And it's funny when we talk about it, but I remember her telling me that, and she said it landed like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, her whole world was rewritten. She just had to scratch her head and she said, well, wait a second. Why am I running a nonprofit business? And then that was the critical shift that caused her to go from that to now she has team members, very successful business. They do design build just south of DC and like the Virginia area. But it was that critical piece to really look at that thing critically. And sometimes this is why outside experts I found can be so useful,
Mhm.
Michelle. I mean,
Yeah.
this morning I
Yeah.
worked out with my personal trainer, and
Yeah.
we've seen massive results over the past 3 years of working with him. He sent me a picture on my phone of myself about a year and a half ago. And I put on size, I put on mass, I look healthier, I look strong, I look younger than I did
Uh-huh.
before. And I
Uh-huh.
showed him on my little fitness app, it says my physiological health, so my cardiovascular health is 8 years younger than my biological age. And I don't say that to say, oh, I'm so great. But what I say about that is that that would have not been possible if I would have just decided that I'm just going to go to the gym myself because I know myself too well. I would sleep
Mhm.
in some days. I wouldn't push myself as hard. And so this is one of the most powerful things that I've had is seeing people like coaches, mentors, and outside experts, not as costs, but in massive investments in
Uh-huh.
us. Every high performer has, sometimes in the architecture industry, we think if I'm working with a business coach or if I hire an outside mentor, it's because I'm broken. It's because I'm struggling. It's like therapy, right? Something must not be working. As
Uh-huh.
opposed to the way that we look at it is that every high performer has a team of coaches around them, right? You look at someone like these Tom Brady who plays, he has a strength coach, he has a
Uh-huh.
stretching coach, right? And so whether you're listening to this
I think his
podcast and you may
ex-wife
be,
does too, actually. But yeah.
well, there you go. Does she tell me about that? What do you know?
That's a little joke with one of my friends. Yeah.
I'm missing the
Oh,
joke. Explain.
oh, you're missing the joke? Oh, because she
Yeah.
left his ex-wife left him for her trainer. You didn't know.
Oh, I don't watch the news, the politics. That is hilarious. I mean, it's kind of
It
sad, but
comes up in
ouch.
Instagram. It
Ouch.
comes up in Instagram. It's like all over the place. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay,
Now I get
so
the joke.
so what are your first recollections of experiencing architecture?
Ooh, that's a great, great question. Well, for starters, I grew up in California
Mhm.
and I grew up in a very small town, 20,000 people there. And I wouldn't say there was any impactful architecture there,
Ah,
right? It's all stick built, modest homes, nothing with a lot of design sense. But there was, I'll say my first experience was my high school. So my high school was built around 1911 and it is kind of this Spanish revival style.
mhm.
So there's this beautiful main building that has this beautiful facade with some different decorative elements on it, these beautiful big columns and archways, very symmetrical. And I remember in my art class, that was one of the things that I drew because at that stage I learned, and it's interesting as I've gone through the process of becoming an architect, is that there is something about symmetry versus asymmetry. There is something about proportion versus the massing, how things look that naturally human beings respond to. So that was the first time that I understood that there is a difference between something that has design in it versus something that is just perhaps less thoughtful and thrown up and maybe doesn't follow some of the conventions or break the conventions in a thoughtful way. That was the very
Mhm.
first memory. So definitely not
Mhm.
something out of an architectural magazine. It's just it's not going to win any design awards, but it did have some substance to it that I remember enjoying and being impressed by.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Um, so what three classic buildings do you like and why? And those would be iconic, not classical, but
Okay, great. Well,
I'm sure you know what I mean now. Yeah.
yeah, when I first read that, I was thinking potentially classical, so I was thinking in my mind, and I'll start there. Uh, an older building would be the Pantheon in Rome.
Uh-huh.
So there's something about I haven't been in a lot of cathedrals, but I have been in certain cathedrals, and unfortunately, when I was in, remember the Notre Dame basically burned. And so the two times I've been in Paris, it's still been under construction, which is super
Really? Oh,
frustrating.
yeah.
It's so sad. But there's any building like that that has these massive, made out of massive pieces of stone, whether it's finely detailed, like Notre Dame, or if it is more rustic, like the Pantheon, right? You look and there's not a whole lot of decoration in there. It's
Yeah.
very these solid, massive blocks, but there's just something epic about that space and very permanent, very solid. So that's one that inspired me. Another one that really inspired me, this is after I'd been through architecture school, was the Kahn Museum in the Dallas Fort Worth. Sorry, it was designed by Louis Kahn, right? But the Kimball
Yes.
Art
Yeah.
Museum.
The Kimball. Mhm.
Yep. And there's something about that space. I don't know. Have you had the chance to visit that one
I have
as
not,
well?
and a lot of people bring it up as a, but I'm not, but because I've actually not been really to the Dallas area. I mean, or
Okay.
really anywhere in Texas. I mean, I've driven through the Panhandle numerous times, and I've flown into the Dallas airport, but I've never kind of gone up. But yeah,
That's typical for Dallas, right? People are like, I had a layover there, but I didn't stop there.
I know. I mean, I have the obviously we've got the the Salk Institute here in San Diego. So I have been to that numerous times, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which I would imagine be very similar. What I like about the Kimball Art Museum is the the design's very simple. I mean, Louis Kahn, all of his designs were very simple, and it's this monolithic board form concrete, beautiful, and the way that the light enters because there's these light wells that go down longitudinally down the structure, and so there's just this beautiful light that bounces off the walls in there, and it's a very impactful space. I can't say it works the best in terms of circulation and flow, but in terms of going in there and having a space where you feel like you connect with the art, it was very, very profound. So that's one of my favorites. Let's see what else. The other one that I thought of, which again, these aren't like groundbreaking pieces of architecture, but the other one that came up in mind was the Chrysler Building in New York City. So there's
Oh
something
yeah,
about the
yeah,
Chrysler Building that it's that Beaux-Arts, kind of 20s architecture, the way that it has whatever that metallic top with those
oh yeah.
gargoyles coming out from the side. There's just something that speaks of the age and just is inspiring to see that. So that's a third one that I'd throw on my list.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really like iconic for New York, right? Like that's one of those buildings that people put up and then they're like, oh, yeah, that's New York, or like sometimes it's like, oh, okay, that's New York. And like how many, so many people, recognize it, right? And so that kind of, I kind of think that like, yeah, if a building can make a statement like that, then, that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I agree. And New York is such an iconic city in and of
Oh,
itself.
yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of cities out there that are beautiful, have amazing skylines. I remember going to Sao Paulo and I was amazed because whereas New York, you can sort of take it in. If you're on the Jersey Shore, you can take in all of New York in just a scan of the head. When I was in Sao Paulo, I was blown away because I'm like, wow, it felt like 10 times New York City. So I understand that there are cities in the world that dwarf New York, but there's something about the architecture, the history of it that's just inspiring. Plus the fact there's so many movies about it. It just seems like a magical place.
Yeah. 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 I have been to the Pantheon. I guess I've been to the Chrysler Building, but I don't think I've been up in it. I don't think I've been up in the Chrysler Building. I did go up in the what's the other one? Why am I not remembering? What the not the Chrysler Building,
Is the Empire State Building, probably.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, so what do you like about being an architect? And I know, right? Are you still licensed? You're still licensed, right? Are you still
Yeah,
licensed
but
or
I
not?
finally decided
Yeah.
I'm just going to ditch the license. Why keep on paying for it? I don't practice architecture in a formal sense anymore. So
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
think I'll ditch the license. I don't need that thing. Yeah, I am still licensed.
Uh-huh.
You said, what do I like about being an architect?
Yes, because you're still involved, right? And you're still an
Absolutely.
architect or trained as an architect. And so, yeah. And so, I mean, it's the way that it's the way that you practice architecture. I mean, Evelyn Lee and I have kind of had this discussion about like, oh, it's like, why is architecture just like, oh, if you're an architect, you have to do architecture like this one way, right? I mean, it's like, we're many different, there's a vast range of things that all of us do, so you're still an
A- a-
architect, even though, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I
Yeah.
look back at my graduating class. I think maybe 20% of us are still, and that I don't include myself, are still practicing, maybe even less.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. And in terms of liking about being an architect, I'll kind of take myself back to when I
Uh-huh.
actually practiced and when I was working as an architect. What I will say is the architectural training has really added to my life. It's given me such an appreciation for buildings. I know that lay people, when they go to places like Europe or they see buildings, they know they like it. They don't understand why. They don't understand the architecture, the history behind it. They don't understand how these cities came about. They just know they like it. And so
Mhm.
I love having that knowledge. Like when I go to London and I'm traveling through London, I can see these very old buildings juxtaposed with these newer buildings, of course, because there was the London Fire and then there was World War II. And so you have this very interesting mishmash of buildings that some of them, frankly, aren't that pretty and beautiful. But
Yeah.
it gives me a
Yeah.
lot of context for understanding the built environment in a way. So I don't think, I know it adds to my life. It adds to
Mhm.
my experience when I visit cities because I see so many things that normal people don't see. And for a long time, that annoyed the heck out of my wife because I would always be criticizing buildings. Look, why did they do that? They could have made this better over here. And I've stopped doing that so much. Now I focus on what I enjoy and what I like more than anything.
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the better. I mean, people say like, why, it's like, oh my God, you were married to an architect, and that, and it's like, you're right. It's like, I typically date architects, but it's just, I'm like, I just don't want to have to explain myself. It's basically, I just want to be able to like just do what I want to do. I don't want to have to explain like why I'm interested in something. It's just like much easier, I mean, I don't know. And and then they all know, right, that we don't really make a lot of money. I mean, we don't usually people are like, oh, you make a
Do they
lot of
know
money.
that?
When I was younger, yeah, when I was younger in an architecture school, I would meet like people and then my girlfriends be like, oh, and she's an architect, and then they would say things like, oh, and she's gonna make a lot of money. And I'm like, what? Like, why would I want some, why would I maybe I should have been like looking for like, oh, it's like, so what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Like they should have been these business contacts, right? They should have made you into these business contacts like way back when, instead of just saying like, oh, okay, I'm not interested in anybody that's going to be interested in money. Maybe I should have said like, oh, how are we going to make money together? Like, right? Like, are you a developer? Are you like, but I didn't have that foresight.
Yeah, well, it also points to a myth that I found in the industry that I had as well, which is that we won't make money in architecture. And what I discovered is that
I know
that's
there
only
are some
because
people,
making
yeah,
money is a
yeah.
skill, right? It's a skill like
Mhm.
anything. And most architects don't spend any time learning the skill of how to make money for whatever reason. And the architects who do learn that skill, it's amazing because it funds their practice, it funds their ability to do more aspirational work. They have more freedom and more agency to pursue projects that are more fulfilling for them, even get things like awards. Like if you want to get published in a magazine or you want to get PR or you want to get your work out there in front of the world, a good
Mhm.
publicist is going to charge you $10,000 a month, $8,000 a month. And so it costs money to be
Yeah,
seen.
yeah,
And if you don't have
yeah.
that money because you've never learned the skill of charging more for what other architects are charging less for, it's going to be a very, very difficult slog. And we
Mhm.
may even fall short of our vision of what we had hoped to achieve when we started our practice, which is can be very frustrating and demoralizing also.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So what would you like to say about the future of architecture?
I believe the future of architecture is going to be about creating new spaces. And I don't just mean spaces in terms of buildings, but new ways of living. I
Mhm.
believe that we're going to need to figure out ways that our technology is transforming the way we live and work. There are new issues happening around this shift. For instance, the virtual world that we have right now, the nuclear family, people getting married, there's a dramatic decline in developed nations around long-term partnerships. So people like the old school nuclear family, still a lot of that happening. I have a nuclear family myself. However, that is drastically on the decline. And yet when we look at the way cities are built now and the way buildings are designed, they're still designed around everyone having their lot in suburbia, et cetera. And as AI starts to shift things, as we get fed up with pesticides and big agribusiness, and we start to go back to maybe some more regenerative ways of organic food, who knows what shifts are going to happen? But
Mhm.
what we do know is that we're going to need designers and people that understand the built environment. And my hope is that architects can come together with the money people, like you said, with the developers, with the engineers,
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
politicians to
Mhm.
help have a say in how the new communities are built. Because in my experience, architects sometimes it feels like we're a bit underutilized. I know there are city planners out there, but architects have a great sense of the greater context of community. And so that's one of my hopes for architects is that they get in, they
Yeah,
can start designing not just the individual little gems or just the buildings, but what's the larger context of how these communities work? Could we do something that's more sustainable, right? If we don't need cars to get everywhere, what do cities start to look like? What do we
Mhm.
do with cities that are already built like they were made in the 50s, right? These huge sprawling cities that have urban sprawl and everyone has their own suburban lot and cars need to drive everywhere. It's not going to take a whole lot of a fluctuation in the gas price or a breakdown in the logistical pipeline or a huge shift in the economic power of the world to suddenly make our current way of living potentially not so sustainable. And so I believe the architects are essential thought leaders, people who are have ideas about how we can live as human beings, and that is super exciting.
Hmm. Um, yeah, two things for that. I met with one of my friends who they lost two houses in the Palisades. They had their own house and then a house like several doors down that was a rental house. But and they're both architects, or she was trained as an architect and he's an architect, but just kind of like the whole rebuild in that, like how are they going to rebuild, it's like how are they going to make that area more sustainable? I mean, they're talking about um, it's like there's all this push about fire resistance, but they were saying like, yeah, we really need to also talk about sustainability, in like rebuilding all this, because that's kind of been put on, at kind of the back burner, even though, there's like so much that all of the toxicity that's in the soil and everything, I have to go down like six things, but it's just with spread, all of the uh, toxicity is just like everywhere, right? And then people are rebuilding, and then like as that stuff gets disturbed, like what's going to happen to the people that are like rebuilding and that have there, but then meanwhile they're rebuilding the whole area, right? So it's like a big, that stuff is constantly getting, brought up into the air. um that was the one. And then oh gosh, what's the other? Sorry, I kind of forgot about that. One of the things was just like the like urban planners as opposed to architects, like looking at stuff, and I mean, I see them, and I know that they kind of get mad about this, but I say, well, urban planner, I mean, urban planners, it's like they really see in like two dimensions, I mean, the maps that they do, right, are not like 3D maps about things, if they put something in for this area, it's like, okay, we're going to have, all this density is going to be this, or all, the height is going to be this, but it's flat, right? Everything is just based, it's not based on what the real topography is of that area. So, when you're talking about heights and view corridors and things like that, it's like you're looking at a 2D, map. I mean, maybe some of them are getting into GIS, but I think that, these maps have been, they were developed like decades ago, right? Before that technology was even around. And so we have like these different zones and things like that. And then also, kind of like the psychology of doing things, like I'm doing these four houses on a lot split. And and the way that the civil engineer had come up with it is that he had put the two houses and then he put one of them was like skewed. And and I came in and I said, okay, it's gonna be, we're going to continue kind of the existing fabric of the neighborhood, and they're going to point towards each other, and this planner brought up afterwards, like, well, why didn't you want that skewed house? And I said, you can't have this skewed house that is kind of at the top of the left. It's different than all the other houses. I said, how are you going to sell the rest of the houses if you've got this house that has a higher, right? It's more unique. It's different in this one development. Nobody's going to want to bring that because they're going to say somebody is going to go into this house that's skewed up at the top of the lot. And we're going to be all the people, we're going to be the peons in the neighborhood. That's why they all have to be, equal in this. And she said, oh, I didn't see it that way. And I'm like, well, yeah, you don't say it because we are trained that, and we have, we deal with people, and we, especially if like custom residential, right? We're also looking at the psychology of the, of different spaces and the way that people react to different spaces and the way that people are, in their, within their minds, right? I mean, it's all communication, human interaction, these are kind of, right.
Yeah, agreed. I love that. It's everything is a conversation. And so for you to have that impact to be able to change the way that building is located, you had to present that idea. You had to enroll them in the idea that that was a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the most powerful tools that we can learn as architects is how do we not persuade people, but how can we use influence to help make the built environment better?
Yeah. Yeah. So are there any parting? I know you have another meeting that I'm keeping. It's, so what other what what else would you like to say?
Yeah,
To
what
kind
I'd
of
like to say is that the we work with practice owners. I'm not a practicing architect, but I would like to inspire any architects who listen to this podcast or catch this is that running a practice really can be that beautiful dream that you were hoping that it could be. It really could be a place where you work with clients who really value your services. You could have the free space and time to be able to do really exquisite, interesting designs. You could have consultants who support you and support your ideas. And you could also wrap this into having the whole thing support your life in a powerful way as possible. And so I just want to leave the listeners with that inspiration that if you've given up on that, or perhaps you feel disillusioned or beaten down because the financial aspect's been really hard and really difficult, it doesn't need to be that way. It's not something that is the de facto, this is just what needs to happen when I run a practice.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you know, even if people, I mean, maybe they can't, but just a consultation with you. Like I've had a consultation with Greg before about, and we've like, and when I'm gonna be ready, it's like I would love to, to talk to you guys and enlist your services. But I mean, even just all of the information that you have out there in some of your webinars, I mean, it's great. One of the things that I said to Greg and I've also said to you is that I just love how, it's like Enoch will draw, which there are not that many webinars that you'll go to where the architect is actually drawing things, which I think that's great. I think that that's a great marketing tool because I mean, I think that architects like really like, wow, he's like drawing this and this, and then we're drawing at the same time, right? And those are using the tools that you use in architecture to present to architects, and which one is one of our right, like that's one of our the secret sauce. I think you've said it's the secret sauce.
It is. It's
Yeah,
funny that you mentioned that. I don't even realize it because it's so second nature to my background and what I do. When I'm having meetings with my wife, sometimes just to plan out the family activities or
oh
to
yeah,
explain
yeah,
something to her,
yeah.
I'm like, let me get a piece of paper. I'm gonna like draw this out. She's like, why do you need to draw everything out? I'm like, it just helps me think through it better. It helps me, kind of organize my thoughts. So I'm
Oh
sure we
yeah,
can all
no, I'm
identify with
always
that.
like, I
Yeah.
know, I'm always, and luckily, like kids are also creative, so they'll be like drawing stuff too, I mean, one of them where, it's all be like, what do you guys want to eat, and then I'll get these drawings from some of them, or like, what do you guys want to do for like this when we're planning a holiday or something, so we're like all drawing stuff, so it's yeah.
I wonder how younger architects are getting trained in school now, because I know that one of the funnest things for me when I went to school was learning how to draw lines. And I remember David Lewis, who is an architect based out of New York. He was our studio professor for a bit, and I still remember he would come in pretty hyped up on coffee. That's pretty typical for architects, especially
Yeah.
professors. And he taught us how to draw a line, and and his hand would jitter a little bit, like it'd shake a little bit. And I always thought that was because of the coffee jitters. But he made the point, he's like, no, actually, when you draw a line, a little bit of movement in it when you're sketching helps to not only keep the line, going in the right direction, but it just gives some character to it. And then, of course, you end the line by doubling back on itself, that nice little, end point on your lines, whether it's a
Yeah.
construction line or a regulating line. And then the way you use the line weights. And it's just so beautiful, that part of architecture, of understanding line weights, of understanding how to use a pencil. I remember they taught us when we use our lead pointers or pencil to roll it gently so that the line stays the same thickness all the way across. If you're using a May
Yeah,
line,
because you're
right?
rotating the lead. So I mean, I still
Yep.
hand draft, so I'm like really a
You
dinosaur.
know how
But
that
but it
goes.
was interesting. I looked in one of my sketchbooks, and you can look in yours and see it. But there was a thing where we were doing a tour of buildings in San Diego, and I had drawn, right. It's like we were mapping it out because it was just like with our AIA students chapter, even though I was down here, but there were a couple other people that lived down here, so that's where we were going to stay and everything. But I had drawn it, and it was all right. It was all drawn with a double watt rapidograph, all of the things, but it was it was a whole map, and I said, see, this is the way we used to draw, for directions, right? And we had like this whole thing like, oh, this is Rob Quigley's like house that's in Del Mar, right? And that it's like now people are just like, oh yeah, we'll just pick up our phone and we'll just put it in here, so there's like, yeah, so maybe we should just start mapping stuff for a while, right?
Yeah, there's a magic that comes with putting the pencil to the paper.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Enoch. And it's Enoch Sears, uh, the business of architecture, right? Right? Business of
I think
architecture.
that's who I
Yes.
am. When I woke up this morning, that's who I was. Hopefully, you never know. Tomorrow
Thank
morning it
you.
may be something else, but yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Michelle.
All right. Well, thank you so
Appreciate
much.
you.
And I'll put in the show notes how to contact him and then he also has a podcast. And so I encourage everybody to listen and watch his podcast also.
Yeah, yeah. Unless you hate money. If you hate making money, don't listen to the podcast. Business of Architecture is the podcast name, and we'd
Money is
also
not
like
a
to
bad
cross.
word.
Yeah, sometimes it is.
Yeah.
We'd like to promote this. We'd like to put this on our podcast platform as well, Michelle, if that's
Okay,
all right with you.
great.
So we'll
Great.
do
That
that.
sounds
Okay,
great.
great.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye
Cheers.
bye.